There you go. How about that? That's awesome. Where do I want to be? I think this is good. So this is an astounding story of something wonderful that happened to me. I should start by talking about who I was. I've wanted to fly airplanes since I was a young boy. I finally got to take flying lessons in a U.S. Air Force flying club while I was on active duty in the Air Force about a year after graduating from college. I'm now a licensed private pilot with single engine land ratings, single engine seaplanes, and an instrument rating, which allows me to fly in bad weather, which means if I go somewhere, I can always get home because I can fly through storms to do that. So that's my connection to flying. And I'll start out by talking about an amazing set of circumstances that put me on this zero gravity aircraft. So let me see. I'm going to start by sharing the screen.
Ken, your online begging and cajoling has worked out. We've got a bigger turnout now.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful thing. I don't know why. Oh, that's stupid. Come on. I can't find my cursor. Whoop. Yikes. All right. Sorry. Yeah, but I don't understand why it's this way.
Curses.
Curses. This should do it. The talk is called Weightless. That's cool, right? Oh, come on. What the heck? I didn't do it. Flying in zero gravity. So it started with this email received August 20, 2012. It's from a woman named Brittany Polson, to whom it may concern. My name is Brittany Polson, and I am a wish specialist. Like, that's a job I didn't know you could get. At Wish of a Lifetime, we're a nonprofit dedicated to enriching lives of deserving senior citizens by granting them their wish of a lifetime. We are currently seeking a senior about 70 plus that has always dreamed about what it would be like to be weightless or has been infatuated with taking a space flight. Zero gravity flight, September 22, we would provide transportation, media coverage, yada, yada. Let me know immediately, thanks a bunch. And they were in a hurry because the flight was September 22nd and this was August 20. So I put some notices on the Astley mailing list to see if anybody was interested. For some reason, I didn't think of me. I thought, well, other Astley members. And a bunch of notices, nobody said anything. My understanding was that the AOS also did a search for members, and that one member wanted to do it, but then there was some sort of medical issue and couldn't. And so I came up empty-handed, and then all of a sudden, I called her and I said, I wonder if I could do it, because I was just over the line at 70. And she said, well, we'll see. And she started sending me documents to fill out and questionnaires and all that kind of stuff, including information on motion discomfort. And it talks about over-the-counter medications, Dramamine, talk with your physician, and all that. And then I have, this is my 0G flyer account with all the things that I have to do: boarding pass, medical form status, liability. They're not liable if the plane didn't make it. And here's my ticket. It's funny because I kept filling out forms and sending them back, and they didn't tell me whether or not I made it. And then they said, you need to get a doctor's approval for this. And I said, am I going to be on this thing? And they said, oh, yeah. So I went to my doctor and he gave me an exam, and his main, I was excited. It's like, I think I'm going to get to go and fly in 0G. And he said, why would you want to do that? Arnie was a great doctor, but less than enthusiastic about some things. So Dave, can you turn the lights down?
And how many people they were looking for?
They were looking for one. So let's see, I'm going to do this. So the deal was, this is really cool. By the way, as part of the trip, I got this free flight suit. And in case you wonder, the cost of the trip, it was a gift from Wish of a Lifetime, was $5,000. Now that I did the flight, they have a frequent flyer thing. I could do the flight for $3,000. But that was 10 years ago. So the cost now is $8,500. So it was really cool because they sent a town car to my house and drove me to the hotel across from LaGuardia Airport. And we met for breakfast, and they said, don't eat breakfast. Oh, I should say that Jillian saved the day because I was telling her about this, and she said, get scopolamine. It's prescription only, but she said she and Gordon were doing one of these fighter combat things where they each get in separate airplanes with instructors and they try and shoot each other down. And she said the scopolamine was really great. My biggest fear was that I would get green, air sickness. The last thing I wanted to do was get airsick in the middle of this ride of a lifetime. So they said, don't eat breakfast. And then there they served breakfast, and it turns out they wanted people to eat carbs and fruit. They didn't want people to eat fatty things. So here's the thing, I go to this and there's breakfast, and I'm thinking, this is a room full of rich people. I mean, everybody on this flight paid $5,000, and that's not something that most people have the money for. So I was intimidated by the rich people. So I went to breakfast and got my tray, and I sat down with a guy who was probably 50, something like that. And I said, how did you happen to do this? And he says, well, it's actually a preliminary flight for me. And I said, a test run. And I said, what do you mean test run? He said, well, I bought a ticket on Virgin Galactic, and I looked it up, and it's $250,000. So those are the people that were in this room, and I was intimidated by them. And he said, oh yeah, I ran a software company for a bunch of years. So, it's all software, folks. But everybody was really, really nice, and they didn't know I was a poor boy. So we got a briefing, and then we watched a movie. And one of the things they said was, in 0G, when you're on the airplane, whatever you do, don't jump. Because if you jump, you will crash into the ceiling because it's zero gravity. There's nothing holding you back. And, you could break your neck if you jumped hard enough. So it's like, right, don't jump, don't jump. So we took a bus out. We were at the plane was at the Marine Air Terminal. You can see the T-tail up high, the dark tail. That's a 727. I loved the 727. It's a 3-engine jet. I used to go to Washington a lot to do stories, and the Eastern Shuttle was run on the 727s, and I always loved that airplane. The cool thing is it has air stairs in the back that they put down and you walk into the airplane from the macadam. But then after DB Cooper held up the airplane and got 3 parachutes and jumped out of the airplane and got money and disappeared forever, they fixed it so the air stairs wouldn't open in the air. So very cool logo. Look at the logo of the person, you know, swooping around, emerging from nothing. It's just a beautiful, beautiful airplane. And there were cameramen there, and they had said something to me about there's going to be cameramen there and a camera and a sound guy, and it was some vague thing that had to do with Jeremy Bloom, who started Wish of a Lifetime. Jeremy Bloom is from Colorado. He was a football star at University of Colorado, and he started Wish of a Lifetime to make dreams come true for seniors, something they'd always wanted to do and never had a chance to. And some of the dreams were simple, like somebody wanted to ride a horse for the last time. There was a grandmother who wanted to go skydiving. She got her wish. One of the most moving things for me was when I went to the website that there was a woman who was in her 80s, and she said growing up, her sister got a bicycle, but she was younger and she never had a bicycle. And at 80, she wondered if they could grant her wish and give her a bicycle. So Wish of a Lifetime bought her a tricycle, and there was a picture on the website of her. She's sitting up there and grinning from ear to ear. Oh, wow. Jeremy was an athlete, and he was on the football team. He was a skier. He won more World Cup gold medals than any other skier in history, and he won a bronze medal at the Olympics. So now I'm intimidated by Jeremy Bloom. Like, here's this athlete. I'm not a sports guy. And here's the guy I got to meet and all that. So I'm completely freaked out between rich people and sports guys. And he had accomplished so much. Well, what a wonderful thing to meet him. He was so down to earth. Couldn't have been nicer. He spent time like paying attention, asking me questions, why I wanted to do this and so on. He couldn't have been nicer. Let's see. So Jeremy Bloom has a wonderful sense of doing good things in the community. So these are some of the video people that were there. And here we're gathered around the airplane on the ramp. I'm going to move this just a little bit so I'm not hidden. So on the ramp, sort of gathered around, they did a whole bunch of pictures before the flight. We had a group shot done. And these are, the guy on the right is Jeremy Bloom, the Olympic athlete. I don't know who the old guy in the center is. And the guy on the left is named David. And I think he's a real estate mogul from Colorado. And I believe he's a big supporter of Wish of a Lifetime. So here we are being videoed. I mean, that's a big airplane, isn't it? Look at that. Holy cow. And here we are lined up to enter through the back. So there are about 30 seats in the back of the 727, regular airline seats, and the rest of the airplane is empty, and it's covered with wrestling mat material in case you bump into it, you know, the wall of the aircraft. So there were about 22 of us, I think, and 4 staffers who were in charge of us. There were 3 different groups, and we had a leader for each of the 3 different groups. And you could tell which group we were in by the color of our socks. And I have these beautiful socks that are beautiful blue, and they say 0G in white on the bottom of the sock. And I don't know where they are. So I would have worn my blue socks tonight, but I couldn't find them. What's really weird is there's only 4 windows in the airplane, and they're up in the padded area of the airplane. And I have to tell you, it is the weirdest thing on earth. I always take a window seat in the airplane, and we take off in this airplane with no windows. You can't see out. You don't know where you're going. I'm a pilot. I need to be able to fly the airplane from my window. And there was no window, and that was freaky. So we flew for about, I think, a half an hour. The place where this took place was airspace out over the Atlantic. We had a window, a box, and it was 100 miles long, 10 miles wide, and the airspace was from 24,000 feet to 32,000 feet. So the way 0G works is we fly along level, and then they have us lie down on the floor like this. And then they announce that they're going to start the pull-up, and everybody's flat on their back. And the airplane pulls up into a 45-degree climb, which is 1.8 Gs, pushing us down into the floor. So it pulls up at 45, goes over the top of the parabola, and comes down at about 30 degrees. And we're weightless after we go over the top and on the way down. It's really kind of diving down like that. So the first parabola that we do, and we're lying on our back, and the first parabola we do is Mars gravity, which is 0.375 of the gravity of Earth. So there's still enough gravity to keep you on the floor. You're lying on the floor and you're in Mars gravity, but you don't float up because there's still some gravity. So they say you're in Mars gravity and you can get up. So I go, okay. And I stand up, and it's like standing here. And it's like, well, what's the big deal? It's supposed to be lighter. So I go like this, wham, off the ceiling. What was the lesson? Don't jump. So I, put my hands out and all of that. I didn't damage myself. So you could jump around in the airplane gently. And after 30 seconds, they say feet down, because you have 5 seconds from the command feet down if you're floating later in 0 gravity, to make sure your feet are down, not your head down, because they're going to pull out of the dive that they're in. So then we did one that was moon gravity, which was 0.166. And I would do a little hop and come off the floor and then float around for a little bit. So we did 2 of those. So then they say, okay, the next one is going to be 0 gravity. And they tell you, okay, you are at 0G. You're lying on the floor. You wouldn't know you're at 0G because you're lying on the floor. And they say, it's not like you float off the floor. There's nothing pushing you off the floor. So something would have to move you off the floor. So what I did was, I'm lying on the floor like this, and I push with my hand to get me off the floor, and I float up off the floor, but I've added rotation and push with 2 hands. And as I come up, I roll over this. I'm in a rolling moment. This is like all the laws of physics with your own body in the airplane. It was like, wow, that was cool. So I do that, and then I kind of straighten out, and I go over toward a wall, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay at motion. So after I do the rotating thing, I start drifting. And the one thing they say is, don't swim, because it won't get you anything, and don't kick because that won't get you anything. So they also don't want you kicking because you could, hit somebody's head and so on. So I end up by a wall. This is on the first parabola, and it's like, wow, this is cool. So I push on the wall like this, and then I kind of turn, and suddenly I'm moving across the aircraft like this, and there's a guy over here, and I'm going like that. It doesn't matter, but we're moving slowly. So, they know what's happening. It's like, excuse me, boom, and then we like a couple of cue balls, and we bounce off one another, and we drift around. So each one of those things is like another lesson. Okay, feet down, and you lay on the ground, and then they go along level for a little bit, and then it go, okay, here we go, and you feel the pull up, and it comes up again. And this time Jeremy was next to me. One of my concerns was, even though I had the scopolamine patch behind my ear, I really didn't want to get airsick. It's like, come on. So Jeremy is an Olympic athlete, right? He's sitting next to me on the ground, yoga style, and he pushes up a little bit, and he starts doing that, and he's spinning like this, and then he pushes up, and I'm like floating around, and he comes by me like that, going up to the ceiling. And I don't know, in the next few of those things, the next time we go up, he's used to flipping and all that stuff, and I'm sitting there, and he pushes himself off this way, and he goes toward the ceiling doing that. And I really wanted to try that, but I thought the rotational thing was most risky. Look, he's upside down. And I just didn't want to try the rotational thing. The guy in the mustache in the lower right-hand corner, he was doing a lot of spinning. And after a few parabolas, one of the staff people was escorting him to his seat and seat belted him in, and he stayed there for the rest of the flight. And when he was on the ground, he still looked really uncomfortable. So I wasn't as adventurous. I would have loved to try a flip and some things like that, but I just didn't dare get sick. I mean, can you imagine halfway through a flight, you can't do that anymore because you think you're going to throw up. But what's interesting, after a while, you see all the things that are going on. And this is off the ceiling or the floor. And after a few of these, you lose any sense of what's up and what's down. I love the woman near the 0G sign. Like, she's got great 0G hair. I mean, come on. I have a little bit sticking up, but hers is like she put her hand on a Van de Graaff generator. Sometimes I'd have my feet on the ceiling. I forgot how I got that way. And then they would say, feet down. And it's like, if I stayed there, I'd come head first toward the mat. So there was a little bit of a scramble to push off with my feet from the ceiling, brace myself with my hands, get turned around. And when they pull out, there's two G's pulling you into the floor. But after a while, you're sort of going this way and that way and off the ceiling and off the floor. And it was really cool because you lost all sense, completely lost all sense of what's up and down. And they did one of these things where they had some of the groups lock arms. They didn't and move through the airplane. And they didn't get to our group to do that. One of the cool things was that if you were in the first group, which is behind these people, if you started there and were horizontal and pushed off from that wall, and that was the only wall that had the wrestling mat material, you could slowly cruise the whole length of the airplane, and that would kind of be awesome. So I mean, does everyone look like they're having fun? Like, come on. This couple came from Chicago. Guess what? A software engineer. And that was he and his wife. This is Jeremy and I locking arms upside down. I mean, how cool is that? I was upside down in zero gravity. Like, come on, that's nuts. I don't know which way that is, but Jeremy couldn't have been nicer. I felt stupid for thinking, oh, he's a sports guy. We have nothing to talk about. So the woman here saw that I had a little camera. They sort of discouraged bringing a camera, but I had my little Sony RX100. And she said, would you like a picture of yourself? They had a photographer on board who took all these pictures. They had a couple of photographers. And I said, yeah, I wanted to do this shot. Like I'm in 0G. I don't need to have my wings out to fly. But I have to tell you a story that when I was a little kid, I wanted to fly. As a little kid, aviation was in my soul. I built model airplanes with motors and I flew them. And I remember when I was really young, I had dreams of wanting to fly. They were so vivid. And I remember standing on the ground thinking, if only I could fly. I have no idea how old I was, but if only I could fly. And one night in a dream, I realized I could will myself into the sky. And I was standing in my dream in my grandmother's apple orchard. And I put my arms out and willed myself into the sky. I'd never been in an airplane. And I just came up from the trees. And I remember flying around. I would bank. I knew about banking from building model airplanes. And I was looking down at the orchard. And I could go wherever I wanted. I could go this way. I could go that way. And I could turn and fly and then say, oh, I'm going to come back to the ground now. I'll never forget that. I wanted to fly so badly. And I discovered, oh, I could will myself into the air. So I could fly in my dreams whenever I wanted. And so one of the pictures I wanted, which of course makes no sense, but that was this picture with my arms out. And the woman was kind enough. She got the picture exactly. I guess she saw me trying to do this. And that's my favorite picture for the whole flight, because that takes me back. That's how I flew in my dreams. One of the things, by the way, when we showed up was they gave us our flight suits and our name tags were upside down. And we said, hey, what's, and they said, no, you can't turn them over yet. The astronauts had flight suits. Everything the military has is Velcro. And the tags were upside down. And they used to ride a thing, it was an MD-80, and you probably heard of it. It was called the Vomit Comet. Now we did 15 parabolas. They would take the astronauts up and do 50 to 60 parabolas, and you would get sick after 50 or 60. 15 is fine, 50 or 60, most people are going to be sick. So after they landed from having flown in zero gravity, when we got off the plane, they turned our things around. And so we had flown in zero gravity because our tag was right side up. And this is the newly married couple. I thought this was just cute beyond imagining. They came from Chicago. Whoops. They flew in and did this flight, and then they flew home. And that's Jeremy. Really, when you think of what he did, he's going to talk about it in one of the videos. His grandparents brought him up. I don't know what the story was. So he has a special place in his heart for old people. And here we get our picture taken when we get off the airplane. And this is the group shot. I think there are 22 or 23 of us. and we get a group picture and a certificate. Ask me if I can find that. I mean, it's a treasured thing. I have it somewhere. So let me see if I can do this. I forget how I did this. So after I got home, my wife and I were visiting friends in South Carolina, and there was a message on my cell phone, and it said, "My name is Tim Fleischer, and I'm with Channel 7 ABC News, and I want to interview you about your zero-G flight." And we have all this video that was taken from the flight and still photographs, and we have it all put together. And I said, "I'll be home, whatever." And of course, I worked in the news business and feature business for a long time. So, you know, you go somewhere and you have all these TV trucks. So one day, this giant TV truck with the satellite dish on the top rolls up in front of the house. And Tim Fleischer, of course, who was famous, gets out, and a TV cameraman. And I'm going nuts. I said, "This is crazy. Like, I've seen you and this and all of that. And now, and I'm used to photographing people for the newspaper. And now you guys come to my house." So I made him stand out front and I took a picture and all that. So this is the report that they did. And I want to make sure this will be big enough. Let's see what, I hope it's large enough to see.
And his dream took off. And one day they said, "You're going to be on this flight."
I'm sorry, I'm going to back this up and crank up the volume, because that was not loud enough. If it's too loud, if it's too, was it too loud?
No,
I'll back it down if that's the case.
Learned more about the zero-G flight, and his dream took off. And one day they said, "You're going to be on this flight." It's like, what? I mean, you kind of hope, but it was just sort of like a.
Is there video also? Because we're only getting audio.
This had been a dream, a childhood dream to fly.
We're not seeing it, Ken. It looks like you're in slide sorter view.
Okay, hang on.
How are we pushing off when our
I don't know how. I'm sorry. Oh, all right. Oh, right. Thank you. Stop share and share screen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How's that? See it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
zero-G
Now, where was this
dream took off.
meeting taking place?
One day they said, "You're going to be on this flight." It's like, what? I mean,
I'm sorry. We were in the hotel across from LaGuardia Airport, and then when it was time to fly, a bus took us out to the airplane.
Gotcha, okay.
learned more about the zero-G flight, and his dream took off. And one day they said, "You're going to be on this flight." It's like, what? I mean, you kind of hope, but it was just sort of like a long shot. For this pilot, photographer, this had been a dream, a childhood dream to fly. The zero-G plane is specially outfitted for the weightless flight. Ken and others first went through pre-mission instructions. How are we pushing off when our arms are linked? He then boarded G-Force One for the 90-minute flight, and then that first weightless move. Suddenly you're drifting toward the ceiling, and because you push with this hand, you're also rolling, and it's like, wait a minute, this is crazy. And now, floating in zero gravity, the wish of a lifetime was now the flight of a lifetime. Took me back to my dreams. I'm just floating, and at one point, you don't need to put your arms out, but I just put my arms out because that's how I flew in my dreams. On the flight, too, was Jeremy Bloom, world champion athlete and founder of Wish of a Lifetime. His foundation has made more than 400 wishes come true for seniors over 65. Just to be able to grant someone a wish of a lifetime. That's an incredible thing to be able to do.
The idea that this guy, Jeremy, thought of it
Thanks.
is just brilliant. If you can brighten somebody's day, if you can grant them a wish, what a wonderful gift that is.
To be able to fly just like it is dreams. Tim Fleischer, Channel 7 is new.
For more on the Wish of a Lifetime organization, we posted a link.
Okay, I have another video. Let me see if I can figure out how to share this one. Thank you, Joel. Oh, stop share. Okay, here it is.
We're all living longer, but it's not always the length of one's life that defines it. It's the purpose, the meaning, the importance of it. I wanted to use that platform that I was lucky to build in athletics to call attention to the older generation and thank them for all the sacrifices they made in our world. Growing up in Colorado, I always dreamed about playing college football for the University of Colorado and skiing the Olympics. You know, winning gold medals and winning football games is meaningful for me. Being able to grant someone else's wish is much bigger than myself. I started Wish of a Lifetime in the spring of 2007. We grant senior citizens their wish of a lifetime. The inspiration was both my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandfather was my first ski instructor when I was 3 years old. And my grandmother on the other side lived with us growing up. And both of them are huge heroes. I just think it's a generation that is so used to giving. And I just want to say thank you. The Tuskegee Airmen are a division of African American pilots who fought in World War II. At the time in the 40s, a lot of people felt like African Americans weren't competent enough. They proved everybody wrong. They said that their wish was to always come back to Tuskegee, Alabama.
It's amazing to see how much support, came out, to welcome the airmen here. I'm a little overwhelmed.
This was a most unselfish act on his part to publicize the fact that this was a site that African Americans learned how to fly.
How does it feel to be famous? Oh, I enjoyed it. It was, so I think your picture is over here on the wall. Look at that.
We started asking wish recipients 1 year post-wish if they felt different elevations and different attitudes, whether it be purpose or engagement or health. And every single category, over 80% improvement with our wish recipients, which is pretty incredible. We granted a wish to a recipient who always wanted to be an astronaut. There's this amazing plane called Zero G. It takes a group of passengers up and you experience zero gravity.
All of a sudden you feel the weight go away. You just push with your finger and then you're on the ceiling. I mean, that's amazing.
I just think it's a generation that is so used to giving that I'm proud of our organization because we're the ones that know. What do you want? We want to help those come true.
What an amazing guy, huh? So that is the end of the presentation. Scopolamine, I had a patch behind my ear. What did I do? Kill this thing? Did I hang up on everybody?
No, we're here.
How long the whole flight?
A couple of hours. And oh, okay.
I'll never forget that.
I didn't, but I was very careful to not do anything that involves rotation. I mean, you should have seen Jeremy was like, that thing, the first thing that blew me away. I'm like, very careful, push here, except for the jump where I banged into the ceiling. But he sat there and just pushed himself up a little and did one of those till he was spinning and did that and just went right up through. Oh, let me turn the lights back up. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? No, I was just very careful. And the fact that one of the guy with the mustache ended up, he was doing all kinds of things and then he was escorted to his seat. So I didn't feel bad for being chicken.
If you're in her ear, I can see when you start twisting in her ear, and that's where you get
No, it was, I have done a lot of aerial photography from the back of a light plane. So we had a plane, Newsday had a plane that was out at Zahns Airport back in the old days. And the back door would come off. So I'd sit in the back seat. I'd actually take off and fly to where we were going. And then I'd sort of flop myself over the back seat. And the whole side of the fuselage was off. And I would sit there and the pilot would circle an airplane, a spot. And we'd be flying around like this in circles, rotating. And I'm looking in the camera and the world is spinning and I'm shooting photographs. And every once in a while, if we did it for a fairly long period of time, I get kind of green. But the funny thing was, all I do is climb back over the seat and start flying the plane again. And then I was okay. As long as I'm flying the plane, I was never green. But I was aware that that turning thing would be capable of making me not feel good. And that was the last thing. Dave.
Is that company still in operation?
It is. You'll be amazed to know that the price has gone up. The cost of my flight was $5,000 and the new flights are $8,500. And if you're thinking of getting married, they have a special marriage package where you get married in zero gravity. It includes 24 people and they have somebody who can perform the marriage, a photographer and a videographer. Discount price, $225,000. You thought Long Island marriages were expensive? Forget about it. Yes.
Two things. First of all, I'm saving to go on this flight.
Oh, okay.
And the second is about 50 years ago, I used to jump out of airplanes, some parachute jumping and skydiving. And I used to have the flying dream exactly as you described.
Wow. Isn't that interesting? Where does that come from?
If I put out my arms and, willed myself, I could fly over the neck.
Wow. I have never met anybody whoever said that
You
before.
are not alone. And I've had a very similar dream also.
Wow.
Yeah.
The thing that's amazing to me is I always wanted to fly and we didn't have much money. I was just barely able to scrape through college with aunts and uncles. I had two aunts that had good executive positions and they helped me and it helped my cousin get through college. And then I joined the Air Force. I was in the Air Force Reserve on active duty and they had a flying club. And I wrote my sister and I said, could I borrow $100? If you can believe this, I think the airplane was $7.50 an hour or $15 an hour, and the instructor was like 10. And this was in 1965, and I started taking flying lessons. What's amazing to me is I've read so many stories, like some farm boy decides that he doesn't want to be in the infantry. So he says, you know what, I guess I'll join the Navy and maybe I'll fly and then I won't have to be in foxholes. I'm reading a book about a naval aviator who was in Vietnam. And they had no sense of flying at all, but they thought, well, if I'm a pilot, a naval aviator, that's better than being in a foxhole. And it's like, for me, that's unimaginable for those of us who knew we wanted to fly. I remember a Cub Scout group going over to Sikorsky Airport in Bridgeport. And I came home and I was, bouncing off the walls because we got to look in airplanes and climb in a small airplane and all of that. So I don't know where that came from, but it was in my genes. And there's nobody else in our family who was a pilot or flew anything like that. But boy, that was, as you know, that's inside you and it stays inside you. So it was an astounding.
Hey, Ken, Ken,
Yes, sir.
yeah, just a great story. Thank you. I just wanted to comment on that statement you made about being a little disoriented until you jumped back into the pilot and started flying the plane again.
I wasn't disoriented. I was starting to suffer from air sickness.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had an issue with vertigo about 15 years ago, and a doctor told me if you're in a car, you're better off driving than being a passenger because your brain could forecast the movement of the vehicle and it puts your body at ease. Whereas if you're a passenger, it's more difficult to do that. But,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it falls along the lines of what you said. But I wanted to ask you, how do they adjust the amount of weightlessness? Is it from the speed or the shape of the
This is so cool. So I asked, nobody else cared, but I asked if I could go up to the cockpit, and it was funny. They said, whoa, I don't know. We're gonna have to ask them or something. I think we were flying back, or I don't remember when it was. And they came back and said, okay, you can go up to the cockpit. And this is before, well, I guess it was after 9/11, but it's a charter flight. And I said to the guys, how do you get 0G? And he pointed to a little thing stuck on the top of the dashboard. It's a G meter. And he said, we get up and we push it over and we watch it go from whatever G it is to 0. And then we just control the pitch so the needle stays on 0. It's like a portable GPS that was like Velcroed to the glare shield of the 727. So it was pretty unsophisticated, but I can attest.
Were they weightless too, the pilots?
Yeah, but they're strapped in. Yeah.
How fast the plane have to go?
It isn't fast. It's that when you pull up, you're getting like 1.8 Gs, and now you're climbing up. And then when you go over the top, you know that feeling when you're in a roller coaster, you go over the top and that bar is keeping you in the seat. So basically what they're doing is going over the top, and it's like now you're falling, but you're inside the airplane. So that's what makes you, I'm just trying to think, if you exited the airplane, you'd be in 0G, but you'd be falling at 128 miles an hour. So, but it was unimaginable, really. And
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Did you have any hallucinations? The only reason I ask is I helped a friend of mine deliver his sailboat from Maryland to Jamesport, New York. It was 80 hours in the ocean, and he made me wear a scopolamine patch. And for the first 24 hours, I was hallucinating, and I had to take the patch off.
Wow.
It was making me crazy, and it ruined the first day of the 3-day trip because I didn't like the way it made me feel at all. And he kept saying, oh, if you take it off, you might get seasick. When I took it off, I felt 1,000,000,000 times better. It was
how long did it take to feel better after taking it off?
As I was pulling the patch off, every millisecond, my body was saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm serious. It was instantaneous to the point where as I was taking the patch off, I was feeling better instantaneously.
Wow.
I didn't like it at all. And then he lost his appetite completely, couldn't even think of food. I finally convinced him to take his patch off, and then he was starving and said, oh, I wish I would have done that sooner. and the third guy wouldn't take it off. The third guy was too afraid of becoming seasick.
Right.
So
but you're a sailor, but I guess you're not you don't spend as much time in the ocean with the long swells.
Right. But I was fine without the patch, but you get nervous. What if I'm not?
Yeah, right. I mean, that was my sense. I just didn't want to be sick on this flight of a lifetime.
And they used to give scopolamine to pregnant women, and hallucinations is like the second or third most common side effect.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So it's too bad. You could have had another little trip inside your trip.
I went to Africa, 2-month-long trips to do stories on the African environment. And another of the photographers had been there to do a story on the child soldiers in Africa. And I'm trying to remember what the medication was. It was the newer of the anti-malarial drugs. And I'm trying to think if I took one a week. And he had to stop taking them because he was having terrible hallucinations.
Yeah,
And I had no problem at all. Do
interesting.
you know what that drug is, Christina? We're-
That's the old one.
What was it?
Just the quinine, but that's the old one.
Oh, yeah, that was the old one. I can't remember. Well, and of course, I did it in 2000, so, but anyhow, I think I only had to take one a week. But the other photographer was there a lot, and
Oh, and the other thing is my doctor, I told her about this later on, and she said that I should have used half a patch because at the time I was only like 135 or 140 pounds. And she said, oh, a full patch was way too much for me. I
oh,
was like, "Oh,
wow.
it doesn't tell you that on the box, when you buy it." So it's like,
Yeah.
But-
But I didn't have any problem, and I felt I was thrilled. I was cautious, but I was thrilled. The idea that halfway through I'd have to be strapped into a seat,
Yeah, that would
feeling
ruin it.
green and go through zero gravity. I
Yep.
just didn't want that to happen, and it
Yep.
didn't.
Why not ordinary Dramamine?
Jillian said you needed something more powerful. She and Gordon did this thing. They have these T-34 mentors. They're 300 horsepower, whatever they are, 400 horsepower trainers. They're two-seat trainers, propeller driven. And you go, and it's called air combat. And so it's two airplanes. Maybe, if I went down there by myself, I wouldn't know who's in the other airplane. And what you do is you set up air combat maneuvering. So you start in opposite, you have an instructor, but you start in opposite directions and you fly toward each other, pass each other, and then you brake and you try and get on the other's tail. So you're going up and down and around like that. I don't think I'd last long in that. But Jillian and Gordon did it. They're both pilots. And she said the scopolamine was absolutely first rate. They weren't sick at all. So. And I'm so thankful that I wasn't, because I wouldn't want to miss an instant of this. I can't thank you enough.
What about the other patches that they were well too? I mean,
They were fine, and I don't know who was using anything or not.
nobody got sick.
Yeah, the one guy with the mustache. He was walked back to his seat and he didn't look good. And an hour later, when we were on the ground after we got back, he was still kind of gray looking. And yet Jeremy was just like,
Did everybody use the patch? Or
I have no
some
idea.
yes, some
Yeah,
no?
don't know. And some people are not as affected by it. It's an interesting thing. There are aerobatic pilots, and they are used to negative Gs because they do a lot of maneuvers where they're hanging from their seatbelts. And there was an aerobatic competition that was like week long in Europe or something. And they went there and the weather was terrible. And they're used to flying every day and they get negative Gs every day. And there was a picture of several pilots with their knees hooked over a fence, like a split rail fence, and they were hanging upside down like bats. And they said seriously that they were doing this because they were losing their adaptation to negative Gs by hanging up, in the airplane. So they'd spend an hour out there hanging upside down like bats, and that way they didn't lose that adaptation. So when they finally flew, they were still in pretty good shape. So there you go. I can't thank you enough for all of you who came tonight. My hope was that there would be more than 6 people or something. So I really appreciate everybody who took the time to drive out, and it feels like a real meeting. And I appreciate having a real audience. So thank you all.
Hey, Ken, can you show the audience?
Yeah, give me a second.
Ken, who presents next week?
I do, again.
Oh, the man of the month.
Sam, you're the host. Let me do this.
You
see
need to
everybody?
stop sharing.
What?
You need to stop sharing, otherwise the audience is a tiny box.
Oh, I could fix that. Maybe I can't.
Are you still sharing? Down by the bottom.
Yeah.
A little bit lower.
Oh, stop share. And then I become the thing. You know what? I pinned myself, but it didn't make, oh, wait.
That's the section.
Okay, here we go. Hang on. All the cables have to go up. So this is wonderful to have this many people come to an Astley meeting. So there you go. So Sam, you're the boss man, and I'm out of here.
You're still
Thank you
recording.
all.
Thanks,
Thank
Ken.
you. You're welcome.
Thanks, Ken. Very interesting. Thank you.
Cool.
Something I won't ever forget. Ken, I'm going to stop the recording.
Oh, yeah, duh. I forgot to do that. Okay, good night, everybody.